All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Tyler Braun. I'm one of the lead financial advisors with the Tranel Financial Group. I've been with the company almost 12 years, coming up here in June. Hope you guys are having a great fall day. This is my favorite time of the year. So the sun is out and there's no bugs, so you can't go wrong with that. Some stuff about me. I'm a co-author of 8 Things I Wish I Knew Before I Retired, right? That's a book. It's behind me there. I co-authored that with Tranel, who's the CEO of the Tranel Financial Group. And I'm also the co-creator of the RISE program. We're going to talk more about that later on in this presentation, but that's a 4-step process that we take all clients through. So that's the RISE program. We're going to talk about that. That's a 4-step process that you guys really need to be looking at for yourself and for your financial well-being in the future. So with that being said, I'm going to get started on today's presentation about the money life cycle. And before we get into that, I really want to talk about a story about a client of mine named Dorothy. So Dorothy came to me for the first time when she was actually going through one of the most difficult periods of her life. So she was preparing for retirement with her husband, and he suddenly died. He had a pulmonary embolism, passed away very quickly. It's a horrible, horrible experience that she lived through as she was right there next to him. And she's sitting down with me with her 2 sons. She had 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. The 2 boys were very protective and they help her with her finances. And we're all sitting in a meeting room and we're just laying everything out, right? Going through, step 1 of what we'll be talking about here, but just laying everything out about Dorothy's financial profile. And she didn't know. She didn't know anything, right? She didn't know how much money, they had in savings, where his IRAs were, if Tom had IRAs, if she had 403b. She didn't know any of these questions. She was a school teacher. She loved teaching, and Tom handled all the finances. So as we sat down and went through the meeting and laid everything out that she had, you could see the weight and the stress start to get lifted off of her. And by the end of the meeting, she started to open up and could really talk about a future for her and lay things out. But, she started making comments. Well, if I only knew this before, or if I only thought of this 10 years ago. And then her son started asking similar questions. Well, how do we learn more about this process? Or how do we prepare for different things throughout life? And that's been a common question that we get, right? Just ultimately, what do we need to be doing differently than we're currently doing, regardless of what age you are or regardless of where you are financially? And we broke that down into what we call the money life cycle. And you can see the diagram here. It looks like a bell curve, right? And the top of the mountain is what people talk about all the time when they're talking about retirement planning. But it starts before that, and it does not end at the top of the mountain. It ends something further in the future. So the first step of the money life cycle, if you got a pen, this is where you want to start taking notes. So the first step of the money life cycle is just getting started, right? It's just like pushing a boulder or pushing a rock or anything else. That first push takes the most inertia, it takes the most energy. And that's just getting started. We see people, clients, prospects, just individuals that we talk to. This is typically an age demographic around that, mid to late 20s, when people start getting that career, right, started. And they're saying, what do I need to do to get this inertia going so I can be better off in the future? And there's some questions you need to ask yourself that I'm going to touch on here in just a second. The next step we're going to talk about is building wealth, right? And this is typically for somebody who's been in a career. Maybe you're in your, early to mid 30s, and we see people continue to work on building wealth all the way up into their mid 50s, early 60s, right? So this is a constant evolution of different questions you need to be asking yourself. As you grow, your money needs to grow with you, right? As life becomes more complicated, your finances need to be adjusted to make sure that you can handle any future goals that change, right? The next step is preparing for retirement. And that needs to be treated as its own individual entity. there is a list of questions, a long list of questions that you need to ask yourself with that, right? You only want to retire one time and you want to do it right. You worked way too long to mess that up, and you don't want to pay taxes. You don't want to take distributions you don't need, etc. So you need to prepare for that. Then we get to the top of the mountain. This is what we talked about before. And this is that retirement, right? Everybody works for this date, but you need to think beyond retirement. So if you drew a line right down the middle of the page, right? Straight down the middle of the page, everything to the left of that line, getting started, building wealth, preparing for retirement, right? That's the accumulation phase of a retirement plan. You're accumulating assets in trying to build your wealth, right? You want to get as much wealth as you can so you have a bigger nest egg that you can pull from in retirement. Everybody that you hear talks about the accumulation phase. Very few people talk about the distribution phase. That's where the emotion and anxiety comes from in retirement. Because what happens is you retire, but then new fears and anxieties start, like spending down your assets. There's not one new retiree that I talk to that doesn't say that they have a fear of running out of money, which is the next one. So you work for 20, 30, God willing, 40 years, you get to a point, you're at the top of the mountain, as they say, and now you're at a point where you're going to be spending your assets. And if you're not approaching that the right way, that fear of running out of money comes into your mind. If you're taking distributions in the wrong way, you can actually start to compound your losses and liquidate those assets even quicker, which is a slippery slope. You need to push into that curve. And what we call it building a legacy. So the planning does not stop when you get to retirement. That's just a new set of plans that you need to address to say, how do I get to that bigger and better future for myself? Whether that's traveling, gifting money to kids, leaving a big legacy behind for grandkids, etc. That's what you need to plan for. So there needs to be constant conversations that happen throughout each phase here. So let me give you some examples of those. I'm also a storyteller, so I'm going to tell you some stories about some clients. Obviously, I have to change their names and so forth, as I can't give any client information out on these. So getting started, right? And this is for somebody, like we said, that's typically in their mid-20s, just getting out of a college. I just spoke to a young individual. Her name was Liz. Last week, she had graduated from a great college, got her first job. She's making almost $70,000 a year right out of college. That's awesome, right? I was more excited than she was when I heard that, because that is a great starting salary for her. And she had some great questions, right? What should I be doing, right? Should I be adding to the 401k? She had some student loans. She had a car payment. And it was just addressing those questions, giving her some parameters to run in between, right? So, she had the ability to add to a Roth 401k. If you're young and can add to a Roth 401k, and financially that makes sense, that's the difference of paying hundreds of thousands of dollars possibly in taxes when you retire or not, right? That's a question you should definitely be asking yourself at a young age, right? What steps should I be taking with the income that I'm receiving for the first time? And what's interesting is when I meet with retirees, they're constantly asking for their children. What should I be telling my children to do differently that they can learn from, right? And one of those conversations is living within your means, right? Setting up. If you save now, right, that's built into your budget. If you spend first and save next, you have no money left over. If you save first and spend what's left over, you've already saved, it's guilt-free money. It's just a shift in the mindset. Life insurance needs possibly if they arise, right? So those are some common questions that we would go through for getting started. That's not anywhere near all of them, but just some that we see. Once you get to that next phase, which is that building wealth phase of the money life cycle, right? I'm going to tell you about Ken. So Ken is a prime example, came to me, was working with me at a younger age. And as he continued to evolve in his career, he worked for a large Fortune 500 company, and he was going up the ladder quickly, extremely bright. As Ken went up this, his complexities changed, right? He was now making a high income. As he made more money, the conversation is not spend more. It was, what do I need to shape my savings to give me the future that I want or to give me the brighter future down the road that he is seeking, right? He was offered a deferred compensation plan for the first time. As he was offered deferred compensation, which is for high income employees, he can defer more income pre-tax and choose when he wants to take those distributions down the road when he's in a lower tax bracket. There's a huge plan behind that, right? He was offered restricted stock units. What do we do with those as they vest, right? Those are going to be long-term capital gains. There's less tax impact for him by liquidating those if he needed a distribution. Same thing for planning around the future that he has, right? And then evaluating what his goals are for when he would like to be financially independent. And that's the key. You don't have to retire. Ken was young. He enjoyed what he was doing. He didn't want to think about retirement. But a better conversation for someone building their wealth, when do you want to be financially independent? Because working because you want to versus working because you have to are two completely different conversations. If you're financially independent and you're working at a job that you love and you know that you don't need the income, think of the power you just put yourself in. You just put yourself in a place that said, if I'm retired, I'm done. But I'm charged up and ready to attack this because I enjoy what I'm doing versus I have to work here because it's a paycheck and I need to pay my bills, right? We need to get people to a financially independent standpoint, and that's where they'll thrive going forward. The next phase is that preparing for retirement. And here's a list of some of the questions or bullet points that you need to start talking about. You need to adjust your plans for your goals, right? You need to look at what your current income is and how you're going to replace that in the future. If there's a shortfall, what are you doing? If you start having this conversation at 50 and want to retire at 60, that gives you 10 years to adjust your plan. I can't tell you how many clients come to me at 58 and want to retire at 60, and that if there's a shortfall, there's not enough runway left before when they start, between when they start and when they want to retire, for us to save the amount of money that's necessary. But the longer that window is, means the less money that we need to save each month and turns it into bite-sized pieces. You need to start having the conversation of accumulation versus distribution. Okay, two totally different phases. In school, right, and in life, they teach us about saving money. Put into your 401k, don't think about it. Add to your pension, don't think about it. Put into your emergency fund, right? Set it and forget it. Well, you've done that, but nobody tells you how to take distributions properly, right? If you're in a higher income tax bracket, take from after-tax money if you can, so you pay capital gains at a 15% rate instead of ordinary income. Right? Nobody tells you how to take distributions from a 401k properly and how to utilize dividends and other avenues so you don't have to sell shares in a down market. Nobody is walking you through those things or teaching them, and that's what you need to start educating yourself with. How to build your assets in the accumulation phase, but how to get a portion of those assets positioned to give you distributions without depleting your wealth. You need to focus on your time horizon. Retirement is simply staggered time horizons. How old am I now? When is my next raise going to come? And what is it going to be? Right? So think about it. If you retired at 60, your next raise would start at possibly 62 when Social Security kicked in, right? At age 65, Medicare is available, so your health insurance cost typically goes down. And then we have the required minimum distribution age of 72, right? There's a sequence of distributions that you're addressing. And you're saying, this is where I am. This is where my next raise comes from. And this is how it's going to work and how it impacts me, right? You just need to understand those different phases. And then there's some huge tax decisions, right? A story that I'm going to tell you about in a few slides from now is about a husband and a wife. And literally, I just met with this gentleman yesterday. I sat down at his kitchen table and he had already filled out all the paperwork. And I looked through it. And at the end, we changed everything, right? We ordered a new packet. We're changing how he's going to take his distributions. If he would have went through with what he was doing, it would have cost him $6,000 in taxes compared to no taxes by what we're doing, right? So it's a huge difference on having that conversation on when to do things and why, and then preparing yourself to turn on the income. And that's a term called yield. We actually do a full presentation on that, right? Yield by definition is the amount of income that's generated from your investments without selling anything. So how do we generate an income without having to touch principal, right? And that's key. You don't want to deplete your principal in retirement or ever if you can help it. So as we talked about before, this is the money life cycle, right? Getting started, that's just the inertia. Typically in the mid 20s, early 30s, you're getting started, getting that ball rolling towards the goal. As your career evolves, you're going to have children. There's different complexities with that. College planning, right? Buying a house. You want to start building your wealth. What do you need to do, and how do your finances need to evolve with you, right? Having the conversation of preparing for retirement. And that's just that checklist that you're going down through that says ultimately, I need to start looking at what my goals are for income. Do I have enough? If there's a shortfall, how do I fill it? Where's my income going to come from, and at what ages? And then you're at the top of the mountain, right? You're at retirement. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. But the whole goal with retirement is not to live life worrying about spending down your assets or running out of money. Life is too short for that, right? Life is too short for that. I have a client who is a husband and a wife. They would come in, and all he liked to do, literally his fun, was watching his money grow. His wife would actually go on vacation without him. She got cancer and passed away, right? So he looks at that and says, ultimately, I missed out on all these things I could have done with my wife when she was alive. So we want to build that legacy above or beyond where you're currently at, so you don't have to worry about spending down the assets or running out of money. And that's where the planning comes in. And there's a 4-step process I'm going to walk you through here in just a couple slides. So let's talk about retirement. I'm going to talk about Tom and Deb. And this is the gentleman I shared with you earlier that I actually sat down with yesterday and started going through his situation. So ultimately, Tom and Deb were married for over 40 years. She handled everything in their financial arena, right? So much so that when Deb passed, and she recently passed, she had a 9-year battle with cancer, and she passed away. When Deb passed, right, Tom ultimately had to learn some things that he didn't know before, right? He had to reteach himself how to write checks, right? How to pay certain bills, those types of things. And this is common for many people. I've had clients bring in black garbage bags where it's stretching at the top, right? Full of statements because they don't know what their loved one had or what they had or where things were. So as we sat down, I took Tom through the same 4-step process that I take all of my clients through. So this is where I want you guys to continue to take notes here. And this is called the RISE program, right? You heard me talk about this before. It's a 4-step process that we take every client through, and the acronym is RISE, and it stands for reflect, identify, structure, and execute. Now, ultimately, I'd love to work with all of you, right? But even if you're not going to work with me or you're a do-it-yourselfer, you need to do this with your finances. No matter what stage you're in the money life cycle, you need to reflect, identify, structure, and execute under each facet of those stages. That is important, and that's how you accrue wealth. You adjust your plan under what I'm going to share with you to adapt to your goal, okay? So let's start with step number 1, which is reflect. Okay, and you can see it says reflect, but I want you to look behind that into the background. Reflect is simply being honest with yourself and identifying everything that you currently have and where it is. A lot of clients will do this on a spreadsheet. We have proprietary software, as you can see, where you can list everything out and it shows you real time where you are, so we can start identifying where we need to be in the future, right? So this is Bob and Jane Doe in the background, and we've listed everything out from their current salaries to their future pensions, to their estimated Social Security, to what they have in IRAs, Roth IRAs, life insurance, cash value, emergency fund, houses, etc. We can list everything out. It does two things. Number one, if a client passes away, their spouse has this, we have this, we can help them gather assets, know where everything is. Number two, it helps us identify this is where we are, this is where we want to be, and are we on pace? We can look at efficiencies. Are there conversion opportunities from Roths to IRAs to Roths, etc.? But you need to start by reflecting on where you currently are. Capture that data, right? Capture that data. So that's step one. Write that down. Even if you guys are doing it on a spreadsheet at home, capture that data. This is what we would do during the first meeting when we sit down. We're having a conversation around what you have, and I'm building this out. Step two is identify. This is all about you, right? You need to ask yourself the question, what is my money really for? If you think about it, money is a piece of paper. You didn't work for 20 or 30 years for a piece of paper. You worked for 20 or 30 years for what that paper provides you with. And that's what's most important to you, right? What is your money really for? Because once you address that question, you can start to dissect, are you doing the things necessary to get to that goal, right? Another way of wording that is, what am I working so hard for to achieve, right? And a lot of retirees, they don't know what they're working for. So I've seen plenty of clients where they might have $2 or $3 million, more money than they're ever going to spend in retirement, but they keep working because they're afraid of running out of money, because they don't know why they're working so hard. They don't know if they're working for, and you probably know people like this, right? I'll retire when? Oh, I'll retire when I'm 65, or I'll retire when the house is paid off, or I'll retire when the weather's better. I mean, there's always something, but it's a fear behind it. They don't know what they're working for. That's laying out your goals of what you want to achieve. And then the hard question is, and this is actually the easiest to plan for, am I doing enough? And if I'm not, what do I need to change to get there? Because that's numbers, right? If you need $10,000 a month of income and you're currently on pace for $8,000 with what you have, how much do we need to put away between now and my retirement date to hit my goal, right? It's just math. And then we work towards hitting that goal. That's the identify stage. That's step two, right? Remember, every client we work with goes through this. That's step two of the four-step process. Step three is structure around those goals. So here's an example of, a financial plan that we would put together. There's obviously, multiple pages that get before this, but this is a summary page. And really, we're getting to the meat of the fear that people have, right? How much money do I need to save between now and retirement for me to be 100% funded, right? You can see it's 131 in this example. If I keep doing what I'm doing, right, how much money on a monthly basis can I afford to take? Or what age am I currently on pace to retire at and never run out of money based on the income that I'm looking for, right? That's a form of structure. You're structuring a plan saying, this is the shortfall, this is what we need to save monthly, and then we build a plan on how to do it, right? Or this is what I've saved, I want to retire next year. What can I afford to take on a monthly basis, building in inflation, etc., and never run out of money? Or when do I need to work towards, right? When do I need to work until and never run out of money, right? Those are three common questions that we get, and it's building structure around that. So that's a question where you need to either start working that math for yourself, or having a conversation with myself or another expert that says, these are how we're going to put those metrics in place to help you hit that goal, right? You need to start building a structure around your plan. if you're 25 years old, right, and you want to retire at 55, and somebody told you save $300 a month right now, but if you saved $400 a month, you could do it. You could retire versus working until 65. Most people would save the extra $100 a month, but they never ask the question. It's the same thing at 50 or 55, right? Well, if you actually took this distribution and paid less taxes, you could net this much more and ultimately retire versus work longer, right? So those are the questions that you need to work with either an expert or just do some research on to start addressing. The final phase, right? The last phase of the 4-step process is execute. And this is the hardest piece, right? It's the hardest piece because it takes the most inertia. It's putting pen to paper. It's executing upon that plan. You have someone actually holding you accountable. Did you do this conversion, right? Did we increase the amount that we're putting into the 401k, et cetera? And here's a list of a few tools that we work through, but it's ultimately just starting to address some of those time horizons, saying this is where I am and what is income going to look like from this age to this age and why. We build that out for every phase of retirement, right? You're starting to execute upon that plan. What does income look like? Where does it come from? And how much is it going to be, right? And is it over what I need or less than what I need, right? And obviously we want a surplus, not a shortage, and that's why we do the planning to get to that surplus. Assessing what you have in the growth bucket and what you're going to be taking income from. We talked about that, right? Accumulation versus distribution. Assessing what you have for the income, what's going to be pulled over from the growth bucket, as you can see, to give you future income, right? You never want to take distributions from your entire portfolio if you can help it, because there's nothing in the background continuing to accumulate for you and giving you future growth for that better life. So you need to design your financial plan around that to know where you're going to take income from and why, and what do you have accumulating for you for the next 20, 30, 40 years and beyond. So let's review. 4-step process. We take all of our clients through it. Number one, you need to reflect on where you are, right? And be honest. This is what I currently have, and this is what I'm currently doing. Number two, you need to identify what you truly want. When do you want to be financially independent? When do you want to retire? And how much income do you need? Answer those 3 questions, and that gives you a huge springboard to start structuring a plan around, right? Because those are definitives. This is how old I currently am. This is how old I want to be when I retire. And this is how much income I need, right? Start putting the math together or working with someone to put the math together to hold you accountable through that execution piece. And that's how you're going to be financially successful, right? Those are the 4 steps. So it doesn't matter what phase you're in the money life cycle, you need to have this conversation, and you need to continue to have that conversation as life continues to change. So thank you guys for attending. I want to give a gift to you, right? I hope you got the 4 takeaways there for the 4 steps that we take each of our clients through. But I'm going to give each of you a free book, 8 Things I Wish I Knew Before I Retired, right? If you would just simply email, if you're interested in that, you don't have to take it. It's completely free, right? Just email me 8 things. That's all it needs to say in the subject line to Braun, which is my email address listed right there. That'll go directly to myself, tbraun@moneyconcepts.com. Just go ahead and email that over, 8 things, and we'll get a free book listed or sent out to you directly. And that way you can read about the stories and the 8 things that our clients have gone through. So we polled over 1,000 clients, right? We said, what's one thing you wish you knew before you retired? And out of 1,000 people, there were 8 commonalities, right? 8 common factors. And that's where the title of that book came from, 8 Things I Wish I Knew Before I Retired. Also, want to invite you for a free one-on-one complimentary meeting. So there is a lot of information out there, information overload, especially in the financial sector. I totally get it, right? You can watch 100 webinars just like this. You can watch 100 YouTube videos just like this. I hope them a little more entertaining than some of them, right? But ultimately, I'd love to sit down with you. There's so many questions that need to be asked. a passion that I have is just helping people execute to make sure they're getting to that bigger and better future that they want. So I'd love to sit down with you via Zoom, via face-to-face, via phone, and just do a one-on-one meeting. You can learn more about our process, more about myself, and I'd love to learn more about you and what you're looking to achieve and how we can help you. That's completely complimentary. So, you can also follow up with us on that. You're going to get a survey about 5 minutes after this, and I'm wrapping up right now, but you're going to get a survey about 5 minutes after that. Please feel free to give us a rating and let us know anything that you would like to hear more about, right? If there's a webinar or seminar that I would really love to hear about RMDs, or I'd really love to hear more about some tax planning, let me know, right? I'm glad to do more of these webinars, and I want you guys to get the most out of your time and taking time out of your busy day to come to these. So I appreciate you guys listening to this webinar. I look forward to hearing from you. I look forward to talking to you. Feel free to email me if you're interested in that free book at tbraun@moneyconcepts.com. And like I said, let me know if you're interested to meet for a complimentary meeting. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.